let's talk about the new boat first of all. So Ammonite is the third hull in the Southern Wind 96 series. So what kind of led you to that decision to buy a bigger boat?
Oh, that's a really simple answer to that question. I don't know. Why did I buy it? I don't know. I just did. I sat down with the Southern Wind people. I've been particularly pleased about the last boat, the 82. It's been a wonderful boat, and all of a sudden they had this boat in build at the time, and they asked me whether I'd be interested, and I said, oh, I guess so. Anyway, I came to do a deal with them on the boat, and so it was well down the track when I got involved, and I was able to obviously do all the interior. Caroline, my wife, did the interior and stuff, and so I've ended up with a 96. It's due in the end of September, and our plan is to sail it from Cape Town. It'll be launched in Cape Town. They on my first boat, I can tell you, I think it's a signature thing for Southern Wind that when they put the boat in the water, they do 6 weeks of sea trials to make sure they build it properly, I guess, and then it probably does a 7,000-mile voyage to Italy or something. Well, in this case, we're going to go east about probably the first one. But I remember saying over on the first boat, why don't we just stick it on a ship? Oh no, no, that sort of wasn't part of the game, I don't think. So we sailed the boat to Italy. So I'm excited about the boat. It's basically just a bigger version of what I had. I think I've always had a thing in my life that I really love a big maxi. And I think now I'm going to get one. So exciting for me.
So let's talk the first Ammonite, so the 82. So how long have you owned her now?
Well, I had that boat for about 3 years. That's long enough for somebody to have a boat, isn't it?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
So the answer is, why did I buy a new one? I suppose because I can. But Ammonites. I first ran across the ammonites. An ammonite is a fossil. So it's like the Nautilus shell, except it only occurs as a fossil now. It occurs in North America. It occurs in Australia too, in South Australia, particularly where that part of Australia was underwater at one stage. And so you get little round ammonites there, but you get quite big ones in Africa and North America. And I just liked it. And I said to Caroline one day, that sounds like a good name for a boat. So so the next one's Ammonite 2, saves me thinking about a new name.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, keeps the family together. It's a nice series. So before the 82, so you owned her for 3 years, and before that was your kind of your first super yacht. So before that, what did your kind of previous boat ownership career look like?
When I was in my teens, one of my good mates had a little boat called a Gwen 12. I don't know whether that's an international class, but it was certainly in Queensland at the time. And so he invited me out to go and crew with him. Well, I think I spent more time in the water than I did in the boat. So I didn't sort of sailing didn't quite appeal to me that much in my early days in Brisbane. Subsequently, I spent a lot of time on the water. My father had motorboats, and I used to spend weekends working as a deckhand for a ferry company. I ultimately got my tickets when I turned 21, because you had to be 21 years of age, and I ran a fishing boat in Queensland for some time. It wasn't really until I came down to Sydney, and I had a really good mate who'd also ex-Queensland, and he had a Duncanson 35, which was a boat built in South Australia, and he used to lend it to me. And now I lend him my boat, but I didn't have any money in those days, and he did. He was a pilot on the Australian coast, and I was, truck driver or deckhand on the weekend sort of thing. So I borrowed he loaned me his boat then, and now I loaned him my boat now. So, he's still my closest friend. So So I got started sailing out of Middle Harbour Yacht Club, and I sort of got the taste of it. And then I bought my first boat from Bob Oatley.
Wow.
You know, Bob owns Hamilton Island.
Yeah.
That the first introduction for Bob to the guy that was running Hamilton Island at the time occurred on the back of my motorboat at the time. And so Bob and I were long-time friends, and he had a boat called, it was a Peter Cole design, Nantucket 43, and that was the first boat I owned in my life, and I bought that from Bob Oatley. So Bob and I had a wonderful time together. We did the Admiral's Cup, which we won in his first Wild Oats, the 66-footer. So that was a wonderful experience. I was part of the crew, but basically they called me the offshore strategist, which basically meant I was the weight on the rail. So I basically did the longer races when Bob didn't sail on the boat, and I did. And so I remember the long race went to the Rock, not Wolf Rock, I think it was. And we got down, and I was sitting on the rail with one of the crew, one of the women. I said, "Oh, don't worry about it. As soon as we go around the Rock, we'll be downstairs, we'll have a feed and we'll get a sleep." We went around the Rock, the wind shifted a bit, and we sat on the rail all the way home. It was a 350-mile race.
Ooh.
I never got off the rail. That was a fairly conclusive time for me. Did I really want to do this ocean racing stuff? So now I'm not fussed. I've done 12 Hobarts. I don't plan to do any more, not immediately anyway. And so my thing in life now is to do regattas. That's why I'm taking this boat to New Zealand. We're going to do the Millennium Cup, which we won in the last boat. At the moment, assuming that the America's Cup goes forward, and I believe it will, then we will, we should have probably 20 or 30 boats up in the Bay of Islands this year. And then the next regatta, which Boat International is part sponsor for, will be back in Auckland for the MasterCard regatta. So that'll be our first test to see whether this boat's any good or not. We've spent quite a bit of time trying to optimise it. I think, as I said to Willie before he sadly passed away, the former owner of Southern Wind, we've got a new owner, a type of owner in these sort of boats. And as much, I think I know something about owners, and all they want is that little bit of glassware or a bit of silverware or something sitting on the desk. And they won't get that if the other guy's got a boat that's 20 or 30 foot longer. So the new owners have got to be careful about how their boat gets optimised, because they'll only get on the podium if the boat will perform from a handicap point of view. And I think that's where Southern Wind have embraced that with the Fire Office now. And so their boats are, I'm sure their boats are quicker and rate better than they have in the past, rather than just being a nice fancy boat. So I think that's the trend. And I'm seeing a number of boat builders are doing that now. And, I've got Pablo, I've forgotten his last name, is the guy that's doing the numbers on our boat along with the Fire Office. So it'll be interesting to see how well we've done our homework, and we'll find out in New Zealand, because I think all of that's on paper, and you never sort of really know until you get on the racetrack. So we'll see what happens, and I hope you're going to be there, Stewart.
Oh, I'll be there. Don't worry about that. So, what compromises has that led to in the interior of the boat? Obviously, because you want to win, you want to podium at these regattas. So you can't have marble, mod cons, everything you want on board. So there's a balance, isn't there? So how have you managed to achieve that with the new boat?
With difficulty is the answer. The boat is still very much a cruising boat, and we'll talk about the cruising I've done in the past in my boats. But You know, there's a lot of technology now of really lightweight materials that we can use. Before we race the boat, we sit around and take a whole lot of stuff off, and maybe the dive compressor comes off or whatever. So I think you can. I believe you can do it, because the rule, the ORC SY rule, still gives you some compensation. I mean, at the end of the day, the stripped out boat is probably the one that's going to win more often than not.
Yeah.
But I still think you've got a bit of a chance. We saw that, for instance, with IMS, where all of a sudden for about 2 or 3 years, the Beneteau 40.7 seemed to win everything. Well, it had a nice interior. And so the stripped out race boat, couldn't compete with the 40.7. So I still think we can have a bit of that. And hopefully our boat will fit into that category. We'll see.
So she'll be delivered in. So when did you say you'll take delivery?
The boatyard in South Africa was shut down by the government because of the COVID-19 issue. They've been back in production for, I don't know, maybe the last 3 weeks or so, 50% staff. I believe they'll be back to 100% in the next week or two. So my understanding at the moment is the handover will be at the end of September, and that will be after 6 weeks sea trial.
And then you'll do the passage across, will you?
No, I think it's highly unlikely I'll do the passage across. It's not something that has a massive appeal for me, but I do expect Kay Cotty to be on board. Kay did the arc race with us on the last boat, and Rafa Trujillo from the Spanish bronze medalist, who's now Australia's coach for the Finns, Olympic coach. Rafa was on board, and he sort of took Kay under his wing to really show her how to steer a boat well. And here's a woman, the first woman in history to sail single-handed, non-stop, unassisted round the world. And Rafa telling her how to sail. But that's okay, because Kay was never a racing sailor. I remember we did a race to Lord Howe, and for those people who don't know, Lord Howe is like 350 miles off the coast. And you go from the Australian coast and you head east, which is not the best way for a yacht race, because you take the weather with you. So if you start in bad weather, you finish in the same bad weather sort of thing. So, and Kay came with us one year, and I was up on deck steering the boat or doing something, and she's down in the galley, and it's blowing dogs off chains, and she's cooking down the galley. And I said, Kay, what are you doing? She said, I'm cooking dinner. I said, you're wasting your time. They're all seasick up here. You don't need anything. But that's the sort of person she is. It just seems like the rougher it gets, the better she likes it.
Yeah.
You got to be a pretty tough woman to do what she did back in 1988. So she became Australian of the Year, and it was a really, and I sponsored her, and it was our company did, and it was just an amazing time in my boating life to be there to supporting Kay, and she's still a very close friend. She was a close friend before, still is. So I said, do you want to do the delivery on the new boat? She said, only if it's crossing oceans. So she's not fussed about doing regattas. She wants to go across the oceans, and I'd rather do the regattas. So it's a good arrangement.
Yeah, it's not bad. When will you get on board the boat for the first time?
I hope. My plan is, one of the challenges is goods and services tax for boats. So if you bring a boat into Australia, you pay 10%. Now we've actually got Australia a low value added tax is 10%, but it still means it wasn't a cheap boat that I'm building. So if I bring it here, I'll have to pay 10% GST, and I'll have to pay 5% import duty, because we don't have a free trade agreement with South Africa. So I'd add 15% of the cost of the boat. And of course, once you give government money, the chances of getting it back are fairly remote. So it's not, I believe I can get a temporary import and that will solve the problem. We'll do a bit of training in Sydney, then take the boat to New Zealand for those 2 regattas. And I've got a berth lined up in the Viaduct Basin, so we should be right there in the midst of the whole America's Cup. So that should be a pretty exciting time for everybody.
It's going to be spectacular. It's just it's a shame that so many boats won't be there, because so many were due to cross the Pacific, will be crossing the Pacific now, basically, but had cancelled their plans due to everything that's going on in the world.
Well, it's a bit sad. I know some of the super yacht owners have already decided that they've run out of time, because they weren't just delivering their boat to New Zealand, they were doing a trip across the Pacific, the milk run as we call it, and I think that's a pretty exciting time. But I've done that, and I'll do it again in this boat, but maybe going back the other way somewhat. And then I think the J boats are also questioning whether they'll end up in New Zealand, because that's a big challenge to move those boats around.
Yeah.
So it may not be quite as big, but I think it's just an amazing. I was certainly at the last America's Cup in New Zealand, and it's an amazing time. And it's an amazing time for that little country. And when you think about the capability they've got in building boats and sailing boats in a little tiny country like that, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Every Kiwi owns a boat, sort of thing. So anyway, it'll be fun, a lot of fun.
And so you mentioned the Pacific there. So let's talk a bit about the cruising you've done in Ammonite in the 82. I mean, you did a lot of blue water miles in that boat, didn't you? So can you just tell us a bit about that?
I really enjoy the South Pacific. I think it doesn't matter which nation you go to, to a large extent, once you get away from the cities, a lot of those people are subsistence people. And I think if you're going to cruise in those areas, you need to understand their culture a bit. My wife thinks I've got a bit of Aboriginal in me or something, and when I go into the Pacific, I notice there's a reaction to me, and maybe it's the square face or what the hell it is, I don't know. But they sort of call me brother a lot, and I'm actually an honorary chief in Samoa. And the reason for that is I've got a wonderful woman that works in our kitchen at Blackmore's and has done for 25 years. And some years ago now, a tsunami went through Samoa. And this woman, Pito, her name is she's just such a beautiful Samoan woman. She's happy all the time. I've never seen her sad. And she just, everybody goes and gets a cup of tea and they walk away, or a cup of coffee or something, and they walk away from her happy. She's that sort of person. And all of a sudden she went back to Samoa because her mother was dying, and she's got 13 brothers and sisters, and they all turned up. Her mother did die and they were there, but the sad thing was a tsunami went through the place. We couldn't contact her. We didn't know where she was, whether she was still alive. So we eventually got through to her. So what the staff did at Blackmore's, they took up a collection to support the Samoan people. And my wife and I said, whatever the staff raise, we'll match. So we had I can't remember what it was, but we ended up with $20,000 or $30,000. And with that money, we were able to rebuild 2 schools in Samoa. So then Pito came to see me one day. She said, oh, the chiefs want to see you. And I thought, what's going on here? So I was in Samoa on the last boat, and I went and saw the chiefs, and they wanted to make me an honorary chief. Now, I wasn't quite sure about all of that, but I did speak to the ambassador, and he said, Marcus, this is an honour reserved for the Prime Minister of New Zealand previously and Australia's Foreign Minister. So he said, he basically said, take it on the chin. It's an enormous privilege they're doing for you. So I was pleased, I was particularly pleased to be an honorary chief in Samoa. And I just love spending time with those people, whether it's Tonga, whether it's Fiji, whether it's Tahiti. you know, there's a great similarity between those peoples. Maybe Tahiti's a bit, you know, fairly French sort of thing. It's not quite the same. But I just love being in those countries. And so what you do on your boat, when you go to the outlying areas, you know, if you're in, you've got to be respectful of their traditions. And if you do that, they'll respect you. And so what we did, for instance, we were in Fiji on the outlying islands. And what we did is we put we must have had a couple of hundred eyeglasses, you know, reading glasses.
Yeah.
You know, you can go on the internet and buy them for $2 or $3 or something. So you sit around and those people just don't have access to those sort of things. And I got to tell you a really beautiful story. We're in Tonga with Don McIntyre.
Yeah, I met him in New Zealand.
Donnie's as mad as a cut snake, I can tell you. You know, he's just run that global round the world race that the old guy won, or Higi, whatever his name is, and he's been decorated for an amazing effort sailing those old boats around the world. That's Donnie. Donnie and his previous wife spent 12 months living in the Antarctic in a little 12 by 12 hut. I mean, he's mad, that bloke. He's a very dear friend. I've been a long-term supporter. So we're in Tonga, and we're sitting around, and so we pull out the reading glasses, and a lovely old lady came up to Caroline, and she said, I mean, it was really, really something. She said, I just want to thank you for the reading glasses. You don't know how important this is to me, because I can now read the Bible. And so she'd spent the last few years of her life not being able to read the Bible. Right. And of course, a lot of the people in the South Pacific are quite religious.
Yeah.
So to be able to give her that gift for the sake of $3 or something was the most wonderful return that we could ever see. So it was a nice story, a lovely story. So we were in Tonga with Donnie, and that one of the most impressive things is the whaling season in Tonga, when the whales come from the Antarctic and end up in Tonga. And we were able to dive with the whales. I think they're a little bit stricter now, and they control it more. You've got to do it with an established charter boat, I think. But Donnie was the established charter boat. So we actually got to dive with the whales, and we've got photos of the whales, you know, leaping out of the water beside our Southern Wind 82. It was just, you know, to be down there with those big mammals like that is awfully impressive. That was one of the most beautiful things I think we did. We have quite an affinity with an island called Falanga in the Lao group in Fiji. And up until a few years ago, you were never, if you want to cruise in Fiji, you have to get a cruising permit. And the people of the Lao group didn't want you to go there. And the reason was Fiji is two big islands. Mm. On the east coast is the Lao group, but it's 180 miles off the coast, chain of islands. On the west coast is the Mamanukas and the Asawas, and that's where most of the tourist places go. And the Lao people decided they didn't want the Lao group to be a tourist destination sort of thing. It might provide employment, but there's good and bad, and they decided they didn't want to do that. So you couldn't get permission to go there, and until about 5 or 6 years ago, which gave me the encouragement, I want to go there if you couldn't go there before. So right at the bottom of the Lao group is this island called Falanga, and the people there are just fabulous. And you know what you want to do is take plenty of reading material. Big Joe down there, he loves getting books. They just look after. They put on a barbecue for us. They don't have any utensils or anything. They make the table out of palm leaves or something. They cook the pig in the ground. You know, I mean, it's quite a good, unique experience. They even had a tattooist there. My Caroline's got a little tattoo on her wrist from Falanga, just as a reminder of the wonderful time we had with those people there. Anyway, I thought I'd do a nice thing. The village was sort of over the hill, and yet it was a good 10 or 15 minute walk to get to the village. anyway, I thought I'd do the right thing. I said to them, look, why don't you come down, bring your wife or something, come down on the boat, and we'll have a little party on the boat at sunset, sort of thing. Well, 70 people turned up. I had 70 people on the Southern Wind 82. I can tell you, we had these people. They were dancing in the galley. The galley's not that big. It was just and little. You get those sort of experiences. You don't get those experiences in the Med or
No.
the Caribbean. They're wonderful places to go. I don't mean that in any way, shape, or form. That they're not good places. I enjoy that. I can tell you to see my wife and our friends dancing on the table in Mykonos is a hell of a lot of fun as well. But to have 70 of these people on board, and of course the carvers running freely all out on the back of the boat. They drank all my beer. It was just a beautiful experience. Anyway, so many of those sort of experiences that I just encourage people, to do that milk run, sail through the Pacific, do your homework first so that go to their schools, give them some pencils and rubbers and maybe a bit of money or something, and they'll love you forever. It's just a beautiful experience.
Yeah, well, there's not many places you can cruise, not many places left where you can cruise, where you can have that kind of experience with cultures that are still relatively untouched by the outside world. There's not many places. Some around, in the Eastern Pacific, but the South Pacific, absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's lots of opportunity to do that kind of.
I remember we went in my motorboat. We went to Papua New Guinea, and my stepdaughter, Caroline's daughter, at her school, she'd done her homework, put a note out to the school and said, if anybody got old football boots, we'd love them. So we loaded up all these football boots and we went to Bagaman Island, I think it was, in Papua New Guinea. You want to keep away from the mainland. The interesting thing about those people, as soon as you go ashore, they say, no rascal here, no rascal here. Whereas with the cities where they've been, living a Western sort of life, that's when you get the rascals and whatnot. So we go out to Bagaman Island and they love soccer, but they don't have any boots. So we produce all these boots. Well, it was like Christmas, it was like you're giving the kids a bike or something, it was just fantastic. I tell you something interesting about the Lao group. In Australia, we have a lot of island people, a lot of South Sea Island people, Tongans, Fijians, playing in our football teams.
Yeah.
In fact, they're probably half the team most of the time. They're big guys and very fit and whatever. In the Lao group, in Fiji, all the Fijians are very big, strong on football, on rugby league or rugby union. In the Lao group, they're not. They have no interest. They play cricket.
Is that right?
It's unbelievable. You go to these little islands in the Lao group, and you'll find two things in common in every village: a church and a cricket pitch. So if you're going to that part of the world, you put in all those, you get some extra cricket balls on the boat, and the kids bat and ball stuff and whatnot. They think the world of you if you do that. And I had an enormous privilege. I was there on Independence Day in the Lao group, and they asked me to raise the flag. Now, I know how to, there is a technique, a military technique of how to raise the flag so that it goes up at the same speed and whatever. And they gave me the privilege of pulling the flag down and raising it on Independence Day in Fiji. And that was, for me, that was one of the nicest things I've done. So lots of experiences in the Pacific if you just do that little bit of homework first.
What about so where are you going to take so after New Zealand, after America's Cup is over, where do you go? Do you sail off into the Pacific after that?
Caroline has a very good friend of hers, and a group of people have got together to try and support the environmental aspect of the Lao group. And so we will be going back there to Falanga, the island, and we'll be supporting, Caroline particularly wants to support those people in their endeavours to keep the waters of the Lao group pristine and environmentally safe and secure, sort of thing. So from New Zealand, we'll go to Fiji from New Zealand. We may go to Vanuatu. Vanuatu is a fascinating place with the volcanoes and whatever. I've thoroughly enjoyed that. And New Guinea, but I'm not sure then whether we're going to go west and do some regattas in Asia, or else we might go to Tahiti again if we've got friends there. I don't know. I don't want to be too planned. I think it's being a little bit unplanned is sort of adds a little bit of mystery and a bit of beauty to the whole thing. So that's what we'll do. And then I'm sure at some stage we'll end up back in Europe.
Yeah. So the first time we met actually was in Porto a few years ago. Do you remember? So yeah. You've got quite a bit of experience cruising around the Med as well. So is there anywhere you haven't done that you've still got to tick off your list?
I haven't got a list to tick off. I would like to go back to Alaska. I thought that was one of the most wonderful experiences that I had. I did that. I had a Nordhaven at the time, and we spent 3 months. Left the boat up there for about 3 months. Went back and forth a bit, and just to see the whales and the wildlife, and suddenly you turn up and you're freezing, and they've got a hot pool you can jump in, and the most memorable thing in Alaska was, I can't remember the name of the town, but I do remember the name of the bar. It was Rosie's Bar, and Rosie was back in the early days of Alaska. She ran probably a house of ill repute or something there, and she's a woman. She was probably in her 80s when we went there, and it was just a wonderful experience. And so Rosie's Bar is there, and and on the ceiling were all these dollar notes and $5 notes and things like that. And I said to Rosie, Rosie, what's all that money doing on the ceiling? Oh, she says, when I have the guests come into the bar, she said, I tell them they have to stick money on the ceiling. So they have to get up on the table to put the money on the ceiling. And she said, when the boys get up there to do that, I pull their pants down, she said. So, it was it could blow you away. But it was a wonderful experience to meet Rosie. She obviously ran a house of ill repute at one stage in her life, I think. So she was just a fantastic woman. Anyway, she walked out, She walked out and said, oh, look, I've got to go down. The only way you can get to this place is by seaplane or boat. And the seaplane was bringing in some packages for her. She said, I've got to go down and meet the seaplane. She said to Caroline, you can get behind the bar and serve the drinks. So next thing we got Caroline behind the bar serving the drinks, trying to keep a record of what we were drinking. So when Rosie comes back, she could tot it up and we could pay for the drinks. That sort of thing's only going to happen in Alaska, I think. So I'd love to go back there. And maybe a sailing boat's not the best thing to go cruising around Alaska, but it'll be all right.
Nordhaven's a good choice for up there. I love those boats. I think they're very cool. But so you have owned motor yachts before, but your heart is Australia's one.
I bought a boat in New Zealand some years ago, which was a boat called Belize. It was 72 feet. And we went to New Guinea in that. Our daughter, who's now 27, was only, 7 or 8 at the time. And we took her out of school. We jumped on the boat and we took off for 3 months. And, I had one extra crew, a young man who was very capable engineering. I start to get a bit lost. You want to talk about hydraulics and electronics. I'm not good in that department. So we took one guy with us and we spent 3 months cruising around Papua New Guinea. And that was I think it was a wonderful experience for our daughter too, to do one. She had one guy. We're in the I can't think of the island. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And what they do is up there, they have what they call baggy shells, little shells. They make necklaces and stuff out of it. And they trade these things for wives. And one of the young guys, one of the young native guys, came to Caroline and said he'd like to marry Imi. You know, Imi, I think she might have been 10 or something, I don't know. He wanted to marry her, and he was prepared to pay 3 pigs and 4 baggy shells or something for Imi's hand. Well, Mum didn't think it was enough, I think. We didn't lose Imi, but you know, they're the sort of experience. I mean, you know, the Western world that we live, you don't have those experiences. And I think for me, to cruise up in those parts of the world and to spend time with people who I went into let me give you an example. I went into a church in the Lao group, it was, and the Catholic and Church of England, the Protestant ministers, you know, the missionaries have actually done a pretty good job of convincing these people about religion. And they had a nice church. And Caroline and I, we particularly like to go to their church service because they sing so beautifully, these people. So we go in the church then, because I'm half deaf, so I'm sitting there. The next thing, she said, the priest wants to know whether you want to say something, because we had some guests on board and the crew. So we were like 10 people in the congregation, sort of thing. I thought, what the hell can I say? You know, it was just thrown on me like that. Anyway, I got up and I thought about it on the walking out to the front of where the altar was, and I turned around and I said, you know, I'm really disappointed with you people. And they're going, oh, hey, what's this idiot? And I said, you know, I've spent my whole life working hard so that I make more money, so that I can buy a faster car or a bigger boat or whatever, with a genuine belief, and I mean this, a really genuine belief that I'm going to be happier in my 96-foot boat than I am in my 82-foot boat. And I said, when I come to your country, you don't have any of those material things like I've had in my life. But I said, the thing that disappoints me most is you seem to be happier than I am. So something's gone wrong in my life. And of course they laughed about the whole exercise, but it's true. They're happy people. They don't have the material things that we in the Western world have, but they're happy. And I think, you know, the older you get in life, Stewart, suddenly the money's not as important as it was when you were younger. And it is about happiness. It is about your friendships and the people that surround you that suddenly take on a greater importance as you get older. And so for me to go up there and spend time with those people, it's sort of like a bit of a, hang on, I better take store here. These people are all really happy and they've got nothing. There's something going wrong here, Marcus. You better rethink where you're going. Anyway, it's a wonderful experience. Good.
Yeah, good for the soul.
Yeah.
So you also run a TP52 team.
The TP, yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about.
I'll tell you the story about the TPs. I've owned 2 TP52s. The first one I bought from Team New Zealand, and they were doing what was called the Med Cup at that time. And I approached the Kiwis. I spoke to Grant Dalton. I said, I'll buy your boat now, because at that stage they were basically building a new boat every year, because the designers had come back and say, look, we think we can get an extra 4 foot on the windward work or something. And in that fleet, you know, 4 foot might have been the difference between being first round the top mark and last round the top mark, sort of thing. So I spoke to Grant Dalton and said, I'm happy to pay a deposit now and you deliver me the boat at the end of the season, which is exactly what they did. But obviously I knew they'd keep it, it had to be kept in tip-top condition. And they won the Med Cup that year and I bought the boat. I brought that boat back to Australia and I think I won every regatta except 2, and I came second in those regattas. And they were so good to deal with, Grant Dalton and the Kiwis. I had some of the Kiwis sailing with us to get my regular crew up to speed, and we had unbelievable success. I got over that. That boat got sold. I won Hamilton Island Race Week 3 years in a row, and then I went off sailing dragons and doing different things. And then I thought, no, I think I'll have another go at the TP because it's just a magnificent boat to sail. And this time I bought Azura from the Romas family in Argentina. And equally, they were really nice people to do business with. And a similar sort of thing. And I bought that boat back. And same experience, I've won Hamilton Island the last 2 years in that boat. So I'll probably move on from that. And whether I get another TP or not, I haven't decided. But it's just a fantastic boat to sail. And we've got emerging in Australia quite a good fleet of older TP52. So we've got a TP52 fleet here now, and it's just excellent racing.
And but just regular day-to-day on-water enjoyment, you live on the Pittwater in north of Sydney. So is there a boat at the end of the garden, obviously, because you can't take out a 96-foot boat on a whim?
No.
So is there something that for the day-to-day fishing or taking out?
All right. Well, I have a wonderful friend, Mark Richards. Mark has driven Bob Oatley's boats for him for years. The Wild Oats has been unbelievably successful in the Hobart race and that sort of thing. Mark, some years ago, started his own boat building business. 3 guys got together and just asked him to build 3 38-footers. And they were built at Palm Beach. So he called the business Palm Beach Motor Yachts. And that's evolved over time. I'm on number 4. I think I've got the GT60, which is his version that he's built for the European market. And that boat is, it's due in about 6 weeks, I think. They're now made in Malaysia because what happened was the people that own Grand Banks, Singaporean Chinese, they approached Mark to buy his business. He sat down and he talked to me about it, and he said, what do you think, Marcus? And I said, well, Rick, I reckon if I had a lot of money, loose money around the place to invest in something, I think one of the last places I'd put it is in the boating industry. It's so fickle. You know, some economist writes about how we're heading for depression or something and the orders get cancelled and things. It's a great lifestyle. There's no question about that. Anyway, Rico is one of these people, incredibly hardworking. So he did sell out to Grand Banks. And part of the deal was he became the chief executive of Grand Banks and Palm Beach. So the 2 brands are together. And that in itself is a challenge. So he's revamped the Grand Banks range and he's kept the steam going with Palm Beach. And a large percentage of his sales are now done in the US. Largely because, you know, the Australian dollar's been fairly weak. In fact, it's been dismal, but that's another story. And the US dollar's been strong. So they've been buying. He's done extremely well. He said to me the other day, he sold 4 boats last week. And I went up to his factory to have a look at our boat being built before the coronavirus. He had 21 boats being built in the factory. Wow. And the smallest boat was at Palm Beach 42. So he's been unbelievably successful. And, you know, I think we're only starting to see how successful Palm Beach and Grand Banks will be in the future, largely because of Rico's efforts.
Great boats, Palm Beach.
I've had a 50. The irony was I had a 50 down the backyard, and Rico rang me and he said, Sandy Oatley, Bob's son, who's the chairman of Hamilton Island, he's looking for a 50 and his daughter wants one. So I said to Sandy, you know, all we have to do is find a price that's good for you and good for me. And, you know, my whole life in business has been like that. Whenever I do a deal, it's got to be good for both of us. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. So we struck a fair price. And the irony was I bought my first boat from the Oatley family. And here I was some 30 or 40 years later selling a boat back to the Oatleys. So that was wonderful. So I'm on number 4 Palm Beach now. I just love those boats. So a good weekend for me on the Pittwater is the wife, me, and 2 dogs out on the boat for the weekend sort of thing. which we can do on the Pittwater. The Pittwater is largely a large part of the foreshore on the Pittwater is national park. So, you know, we're 20 miles from the centre of the CBD in Sydney, but you can go out and within half an hour you can anchor at a beach and probably not see anybody for the whole weekend. So it's still largely unspoiled, as opposed to Sydney Harbour, which is busy as hell. But you know, when we get these Pommy tourists come out here, we take them out and sail under the harbour bridge, and they think they've had a great day. But after a while, it gets a bit boring. So anyway, the Pittwater is a wonderful place to live. So that's what I do with my Palm Beach. I'm looking forward to my new one. It's a 60-foot GT and I'm number 2. I've never liked to buy number 2. I like to buy number 3. Let them sort out the problems in the first 2. So this is a bit of a risk for me, but I'm sure Rico will look after me.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. So that's pretty good fleet. So 60-foot Palm Beach motorboat, TP52, 96-foot Southern Wind on its way. Is there anything else?
I have to admit, I've also got a McConaughey 38. And we've got a nice little fleet, one design fleet, but it's just a race boat. We have 7 crew, but it's quick. It's really quick. And we've got a bunch of good sailors around us, and we do one design regattas with that. One design's the best racing, no question. Whether it's Etchells or McConaughey 38s or Far 40s, I had about 3 or 4 Far 40s at various stages, and we had a fair bit of success with Australian championships and whatnot, and in the Far 40. And you just build a camaraderie of other owners and whatnot, which you tend not to do in a yacht club, because most of the yacht club races are handicap stuff. So by the time the little boat goes home, the others gets back, the others have all gone home. But when you're in a one design fleet, you're all back at the club at the same time, and I don't know, there's a bit of glue that goes on there, and it can be fairly competitive in a one design fleet. But the best thing is one design, you learn the rules of sailing. And I had a young man whose father's just bought a Southern Wind, and he's suggested he'd steer the boat, and I said the best thing you can do is go and buy an Etchell, get a couple of really good sailors to sail with you, and learn how to sail. So next time when you go back on your dad's boat, you'll be able to helm the boat, and you won't have the crew putting shit on you because you don't know how to steer the boat properly, which is typical of what crews do. They can be fairly cutting at times. Why doesn't Marcus get off the wheel and put this guy on? He's got a bronze medal in the last Olympics or something. But when you tell them from the outset, this is my boat and I'm steering the boat, that's it. That's not going to change. Once you've said that, you change the rules on the boat. Then they turn around, they look at you, Marcus, we're not too high, are we? And I say, oh, no, of course not. So it changes the way the boat works. You want to sail with people that you enjoy sailing with, and I think that's one of the successes I've had in sailing with some really nice people.
Doesn't Neville Crichton sail in that one design fleet in Sydney as well, or is that a different one?
Say that again?
Doesn't Neville Crichton sail in that one design fleet as well?
Yeah, Neville has. Well, it was an interesting story. I got attracted to the McConaughey 38 because it was one design, and so I rang Lang Walker, and Lang's got a 180-foot yacht or something, still got that. And anyway, I rang Lang and I said, Lang, I'm a bit interested in this. I said, if you buy one, I'll buy one. And Lang said, okay. And then he said, we'll ring Neville. So we rang Neville. Neville, if you buy one, we'll buy one. So we had 3 boats. Now I initiated that, and then I got stuck with the problem. What do? Do I get the property developer to do the deal with the boat builder and the sailmaker, or do I get the car dealer, which was Neville? So we settled on the property dealer. So Lang was sent off to do the deal for the 3 of us, and we had a lot of fun. but Lang and Neville are not in the fleet now, but we had a lot of fun for a few years sailing against one another. And that's the sort of thing that, delivers that experience that only sailing can do. Maybe if you drive fast motor cars, that does that, but I'm not so sure. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it's a great feeling when you're fleet sailing like that. It's really good. Marcus, I'm just aware I've taken up a lot of your time.
Right.
I just want to say thank you very much for sharing those stories with us. It's been great.
Yeah, well, I hope that there's some meat in that to make it interesting. I love what you're doing with the magazine. I made a bit of a mistake. What happens is I get it by mail, but sometimes it seems to be a bit slow. And all of a sudden the news agents will have a new one, and I'm off on my boat for the weekend. I thought, they're not cheap, these magazines you sell, And I thought, will I or won't? Oh, bugger it. So I go and buy one. Now I've ended up with 2. I actually found the other day that I had 3 boat internationals, all the same issue. So I'd just like you to speed up the postal one a little bit so I don't go silly and run and buy another one.
It does take a long time to get down to Australia. I don't quite know why. Yeah, it's a problem. We'll fix it.
Yeah, I think you guys do an outstanding job with that magazine, and I don't read books a lot, but I never miss a copy.
Means a lot. Thank you very much.
All right.
All right, buddy. Well, I'll see you in Auckland.
See you in Auckland. I look forward to that. Fantastic.
Yeah. I'll join you. I'll sit on the rail for you for a day or two. I'd love that.
Okay. Thank you.
Cheers, Marcus.
All the best. Bye for now.